Just who was responsible for the 9/11 attacks on New York and Washington? Was it really Osama bin Laden, or are there other contenders? Perhaps it was rogue government agents operating with the tacit support of an equally shadowy group of industrialists. Or maybe it was revenge-seeking aliens who'd escaped from Area 51. Perhaps it was even forces we are forbidden to discuss on air.
But the cry is the truth is out there. And indeed, a few minutes on the internet will reveal the covert role played by aliens, neocons, shape-shifters, Israeli agents, spin doctors, neo-Nazis, and of course George W. Bush. For a reality check, we turn to our next guest. Clive Williams is an adjunct professor from the Strategic and Defence Studies Centre at the ANU. He recently delivered a public lecture on terrorism conspiracy theories, and here he is discussing 9/11.
There's a spectrum from those who are mildly questioning of official versions of events to total disbelievers. The main theory is that it was a false flag operation orchestrated by an organisation with links into the United States government. And one of the major actors in this conspiracy approach to 9/11 is the 9/11 Truth Movement, which is quite active in promoting itself and an alternative view about the reasons for 9/11. This is the configuration of Ground Zero, which is the name given nowadays to where the World Trade Center towers were. And behind it you can see there WTC-7, which I also put in the picture on the left, which is a building that collapsed, and conspiracy theorists say that this was a building that was not affected by the collapse of the towers and obviously was brought down by explosives. The Pentagon was, of course, hit by an aircraft, and part of it collapsed and killed a number of people at the Pentagon. This was the plane, or what was left of the plane, that went down at Shanksville. There were allegations that this plane was brought down by a missile, or that the debris was too far flung for it to be possible from the kind of crash that occurred. If you actually look at some of the information on that, where it said, for example, that the debris, some of the debris was 8 miles away. In fact, that's 8 miles by road. It's only about a mile if you actually go by as the crow flies. So, and it was sort of lighter debris that was carried by the wind. So the heavy parts of the aeroplane all stayed in the general area of the crash site. Anyway, ascribed motivations were to justify the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq in order to control vast oil resources, to facilitate increased US military spending, and to restrict domestic civil liberties. It's been alleged that despite foreknowledge, the US didn't try to prevent the attacks, that the World Trade Center collapse was a controlled demolition. It was not a plane that hit the Pentagon. Flight 93 was shot down by a fighter jet. That's the Shanksville flight. The names of the hijackers were known before the hijack, and 9/11 was orchestrated by Jewish interests. Jewish interests seem to be everywhere. Anyway, the Bedell case relates to this. This is the guy who earlier this month opened fire on Pentagon police at the Pentagon metro station. The Washington Metro runs through underneath the Pentagon, and there's a metro station there. Anyway, that's where Patrick Bedell opened fire on the police because he believed the US government was behind the 9/11 demolitions and was controlled by a sinister organisation leading it towards a dark new age. Bedell was shot dead by the police officers. Bedell had a range of views about conspiracies. He was a person that subscribed to a lot of theories, and he was more in the category of the ones who actually have a sort of overarching view about conspiracies. Anyway, some of the other concerns was that it was an official cover-up, that there was manipulation of the black boxes, the bin Laden tapes claiming responsibility lacked credibility, that somehow it was financed by Pakistan and others, that Saudi Arabia, Israel and Pakistan weren't adequately investigated, and of course lastly there was involvement by the shape-shifting aliens. Another concern was that it was part of a population reduction conspiracy which included swine flu release. As you know, I mean, there was, 3,000 people killed at the World Trade Center, or on 9/11 at least. Actually, probably a bit more, because I found from the police talking to them that there were a lot of illegal immigrants working as cleaners and so on, and they might have accounted for another 10%, which of course they weren't included because they weren't recorded anywhere. Anyway, National Geographic did a check of these findings. They aired a program called Science and Conspiracy, in which the US Energetic Materials Research and Testing Centre, which is a reputable body, tested some of the claims frequently made by those who questioned the official account. They concluded that burning jet fuel alone can sufficiently raise the temperature for a short time of a steel support column to the point of structural failure. It doesn't have to get to the point of melting, and that a controlled demolition using conventional techniques would leave clear evidence that was not found at ground zero. The testing also concluded that the type of hole found at the Pentagon was consistent with the Flight 77 scenario, with the flight flying into the building. Another view had been that it was a missile that hit the building, on the basis that there wasn't much left of the aeroplane. I spoke to Robert Mann at one stage, and he's since written a book about his experiences, and he was deployed from the Central Identification Laboratory in Hawaii. They do a lot of MIA work internationally, but they also do disaster victim identification. Anyway, he went to the Pentagon after the 9/11 attack, and he told me that they were able to identify, I think it was all but 5 of the 189 victims, including the 5 terrorists. There's also an account of that in his book, The Forensic Detective, which is a good read. Anyway, Philip Zelikow, who was the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, said that one reason you tend to doubt conspiracy theories when you've worked in government is because you know government is not nearly competent enough to carry off elaborate theories. And I would certainly subscribe to that. It's a banal explanation, but imagine how efficient it would need to be, government that is. And of course, the bigger the plot, the more difficult it is to keep quiet about it.
Clive Williams is Adjunct Professor at the Strategic and Defence Studies Centre at the ANU. The full title of his public lecture is Terrorism, Conspiracy Theories and the 1978 Sydney Hilton Bombings, Lockerbie, 9/11 and the London 7/7 bombings. And you can hear that lecture in full this Sunday, 18th of April, on Big Ideas at 5 p.m. here on ABC Radio National. Or you can access it for the next 4 weeks online.
What's wrong with the public service?
We massively underinvest in the professional development of our staff when compared with the private sector, and the leadership of the public service hasn't put the emphasis that it should on investing in the professional development of staff.
Australia's top bureaucrat, Terry Moran, in the National Interest with me, Peter Mayers. Download or stream this program from the Radio National website.